Well, before I moved to Memphis, of all the things I'd been exposed to, it's funny because, like I said, pop, rock, calypso,
Yeah.
and definitely country. I knew how to do all those styles, but I had never, and I'd always appreciated R&B, but I'd never been able to do it. And in
Hmm.
Memphis, it's like being in France and learning French.
Yeah.
So I'd not only learned to do it, but now it's part of my musical DNA.
Okay.
When I first moved to Nashville, one of the first, uh, jingles that I got to do for Kelso Hurston here was with a guy I'd never met that I was gonna do a duet with, named Dave Loggins. Dave Loggins is the one that sang "Please Come to Boston,"
Right.
and when he started singing and I started singing, we both, like, recognized, "Oh my gosh, I need to sing with you." And in fact, I asked him if he was from Memphis, but he wasn't. He was from, I think it's North Carolina or someplace, but he had that the feel and the R&B groove that you really have to be in love with to be able to really get.
Yeah.
So I ended up being on about 70% of the demos of his hit songs on MCA because he liked the way I sang, so I sang backgrounds. So Memphis still came into play when
Hmm.
we finally moved to Nashville, yes.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. We are getting off the Springsteen train tonight, but he will come up as he normally does. And I have a 50-year veteran of the music and voice industry. She must have started when she was negative 15. Judy Rodman, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, and I'll take that.
Yeah. So tell us a little about yourself.
Well, honestly, I've been in music. I've been singing since I was 2 and, didn't really plan on going into the music business. I planned on going into science and, research, and I was gonna be like, the first woman astronaut and stuff like that, but it just didn't work out that way because of the way we moved.
Okay.
But anyway, was born in California and moved all over the place. My father was an air traffic controller and a
Mm,
musician on the side. So we always sang. My whole upbringing was us singing as a family band in every place that we moved. And so from Alaska to Miami and bunches of places in between. So that really speaks to where my music and my heart for music comes from. Is a lot of different influences. So, when I was in high school, my choir director, who I was playing piano for that church, he enlisted me to do my first jingle, and it would turned out to be a national jingle. And then I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can make money with my voice." So we went from there, and I started my professional career when I was 17.
wow.
Mhm.
So did your family just do a lot of church music? Did you guys do
No,
uh
we had a family jam
okay.
everywhere we went, and both my parents were from rural Mississippi,
Okay.
and that's what we didn't do TV, we did everybody get out their instruments, and those who can't play or sing, they're the ones that listen.
Okay.
And that's the way I grew up.
Oh, interesting.
Mm.
Um some of my happiest memories are same thing. My dad was stationed after coming back from Vietnam. He was in Fort Knox, Kentucky, and several of his friends played guitar, and so they would come over to our house, and the smoke would be just so
Oh, yeah.
thick, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And everyone would have guitars, and they would just take turns playing.
Yeah.
Hey, Jesse, do you got one for us and everything? And I remember loving
Mhm.
all that community and that music.
Alright, and everybody played with everybody, whether they could or not, and
Yeah.
everybody invited it, so it was it was real community. It's the way I grew up loving music
Hmm.
and, realizing that it could unite people and, so yeah.
What any specific genre of music they played or you listened to
Oh,
growing
they
up?
were hillbilly country,
Okay.
but I was raised, in Alaska, through and in school, I got into classical music even, playing violin and all, and I really grew up to have quite different tastes from my family, uh,
Okay.
but I knew all the country songs,
Right.
so but yeah, my high school, I grew up to really love. You're not gonna believe this, but, in my high school, we were sorta divided between the Beatles and the Rolling Stones.
Okay.
I was a stoner.
Okay. So okay.
So but I also loved the R&B stuff, Sly and the Family Stone, Aretha, The Temptations, those people, but I also loved and I really appreciated the Beatles too, but I also loved the Moody Blues because they were experimental and not just typical triad that my ears would be bored with. And I
Right.
loved the Carpenters for the incredible vocals. So I just grew up in every place I lived, even in Miami, I gained a love for reggae and
Hmm.
calypso music. So everything goes into what I've done in my career.
How many how many different have you ever counted how many schools you went through kindergarten through 12th grade?
I haven't counted them all together, but I know in 3rd grade, I was in 3 different cities.
Okay.
Yeah, in Alaska and, for a stint in Mississippi while we moved or something, and then, in Miami. And then but the longest time I've ever lived anywhere is Nashville.
Okay.
But a lot of my growing up was in Florida, and a lot of my musical influences are from Memphis.
Okay.
So
So the reason I ask is my dad was in the army and my mom was a mommy's and daddy's girl.
mhm.
So the moment she had a chance, she would go home to Louisiana.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I counted once that I went through 12 different schools. And when I spent all 4 years in high school in the same school, but I had multiple years where I went to 3 different schools,
Oh, yeah.
just because of the way
Oh,
we were
yeah.
moving and everything. So,
Well, and we had 4 kids in my family, and
yeah.
one of my sisters was really traumatized by the move. I
Mhm.
thrived on it because you could reinvent yourself
Okay.
everywhere, but the biggest deal was when we moved in the middle of my, senior year in high school.
Oh, yeah, that's tough.
And so I went no, not my senior year, I'm sorry, 10th grade, my
Okay.
first year in high school, from Miami, which the schools were real advanced, to Jacksonville, which
Mhm.
was not let's just say not as
Sure.
advanced.
Right.
So instead of going on the science track, which I would have done if I'd stayed in Miami, it just, I made 4.0s without cracking a book in Jacksonville, and so I just kept, doing music, and kind of that became the thing I did, and I
Yeah.
started my, session work in Memphis and just went from there, then, got married and had a child, and had an issue with being sick when my child was born. 3 months in the hospital, 7 weeks in
Mm.
intensive care, and so because of that, I learned and I got my voice back pretty much by myself. Didn't get it all until I got to Nashville, but long story short, we moved from Memphis to Nashville. Memphis, I was a staff, singer in a jingle group, and I was doing a lot of the R&B records, like, for Carla Thomas and BJ Thomas's daughter,
Yeah.
and, Willie Mitchell, who produced, Phoebe Snow, and then also Larry Rogers, who produced Charlie McLean and, so the country
Wow.
Tom T. Hall's early hits I was on. So, I'm like, I was on all of that stuff, plus I was part of a top 40 band, and we learned all kinds of cover songs.
Sure.
So, boy, did I get an education between the jingle mill where those were the days that editing required blood because, you use the razor blades on
Right.
the tape. So you had to be accurate to be a staff singer in a jingle company.
Right.
And then you also had to, I had to learn, styles really organically, including R&B, for the cover stuff that we did. So, it all went into my education. Yeah.
You mentioned that you wrote a jingle, and I wanted to go back to that. You said it got a little national play. What
No, I
was it?
sang one. I
Yeah,
sang
sang
one.
one. Yeah, what
Yeah.
was it?
Gino's Pizza Logs.
Oh, how funny.
Yeah, that was my introduction to the world of jingles, and then,
Hmm.
like I say, moved to Memphis and kept
Yeah.
on.
So when you say jingles, is that, and I guess that still happens to a certain degree, but the um
Oh, yeah,
KLOU, yeah,
the
that
call
got,
letters.
yeah, the call letters
W
and doing little, yeah,
WCRP.
yeah,
Okay.
or quickly, and the little quick, like, I still get a kick out of on Sirius, on the weekends they play American Top 40.
Yeah.
They replay it, and it just brings back um home after church with my AM radio listening to Casey Kasem
Oh my
count
gosh.
down the
Oh.
songs.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yes, and I did some voiceover for him, and so there were radio IDs and jingles, at the
Hmm.
time, the Tanner organization that I was,
Sure.
singing for did 70% of the world's jingles.
Wow.
So we worked from 8:30 in the morning till 3:30 in the afternoon. If we didn't get done, we had to work till 5:30. If we didn't get done, that's 5 days a week. If we didn't get done, we worked Saturdays.
Yeah.
So, and then in the evenings, I would go sing on an R&B record, a gospel record, or something from that at High Records, or
Hmm.
something at the country thing, and then I became a member of the top 40 group, and my husband to be, who is still my husband, was the drummer in the band. So it
That
was,
is greatness.
yeah,
So I want to talk a little bit more. You mentioned your musical education. You learned a lot of things, but Memphis, if you had to put it down,
yeah, yes,
was where I'm gonna, my words, not yours. That's where you got your master's, your doctorate, right?
exactly, yes.
So tell
Mhm.
me a little bit about that.
Well, before I moved to Memphis, of all the things I'd been exposed to, it's funny because, like I said, pop, rock, calypso,
Yeah.
and definitely country. I knew how to do all those styles, but I had never, and I'd always appreciated R&B, but I'd never been able to do it. And in
Hmm.
Memphis, it's like being in France and learning French.
Yeah.
So I'd not only learned to do it, but now it's part of my musical DNA.
Okay.
When I first moved to Nashville, one of the first uh, jingles that I got to do for Kelso Hurston here was with a guy I'd never met, that I was going to do a duet with, named Dave Loggins. Dave Loggins is the one that sang "Please Come to Boston."
Right.
And when he started singing and I started singing, we both like recognized, oh my gosh, I need to sing with you. And in fact, I asked him if he was from Memphis, but he wasn't. He was from, I think it's North Carolina or someplace, but he had that the feel and the R&B groove that you really have to be in love with to be able to really get.
Yeah.
So I ended up being on about 70% of the demos of his hit songs on MCA, because he liked the way I sang. So I sang backgrounds. So Memphis still came into play when
Hmm.
we finally moved to Nashville. Yes.
Yeah. Now, how long have you been in Nashville?
We moved in 1980.
Okay.
Been in
And
there.
it's still
Been
home?
in Memphis since. I'm there right now.
Yeah. I I started a new job back in 2020, February 2020, right before the pandemic, which is a unique thing to start a new job. And, a month later, the world is shutting down.
Oh, yes.
But before, we did a quick, long weekend in Memphis, my wife and I, and
Mhm.
went to every museum they offered and everything. We had gone to Graceland years ago, so we didn't do that again. And we were just amazed at the musical DNA of that city.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we growing up in Louisiana, my wife will always have a special place in her heart for New Orleans,
Mhm,
because that's where her parents would take them and they would go and do everything. But we both were just amazed at the culture and the beautiful music atmosphere of there in Memphis.
mhm.
Yeah.
When I first moved to Memphis, there was the coolest thing. I'm so glad I got in on it because
Yeah.
it was the waning days of it, but, there was a club called the Sharecropper, which was a bring your own bottle kind of
Okay.
place, and but people would just a funky little old I think it used to be a church or something, and they call it
Yeah.
the Sharecropper, and, you go in there and you'd bring your own alcohol, and they'd provide the stuff to put it in, and you'd listen to people that dropped in from everywhere, the Brecker brothers from New York playing, Ronnie Tutt, who was, Elvis's drummer, all kinds of people, Larry Mahobrat, all kinds of people would just pop in, and there was a black lady, blues singer,
Mm-hmm.
Mamie Dell, I think was her name, or Bell, but it was like stepping back in a speakeasy.
Right.
And it was you to be able to actually be there was like being a part of history.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I moved to Nashville, a similar thing happened, which is I got to be part of the simul sessions where I'm singing backgrounds for Johnny Cash while he's standing there at the mic, and
Wow.
all the musicians are around behind their baffles.
Yeah.
And I'm with the background singers with Herschel Wigginton and the Nashville Edition that I'm singing with behind our baffle, and to be in there for a few years with the, simul sessions was another really cool thing I got to experience, yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. Um, are you still active performing?
Since the pandemic, I've decided I don't
Yeah.
wanna be sick.
Okay.
And
I get that.
unlike most of my vocal students, I've been teaching for about, close to 22, 25 years, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And, my students and my recording clients, because I do a lot of production as well, they do have to go perform and they get COVID all the time, but I
Yeah.
don't. So
Okay.
I don't.
Okay.
I do some virtual concerts sometimes, but I do background vocals all the time, right here,
Hmm.
or I will step into a studio now. I've been, vaccinated and boosted and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like I could probably get by with it if I did get COVID, but if I have my preferences, I prefer not to.
Yes, I get that feeling as well. Um, so talk about how you moved from, being a production assistant and being a background vocalist and all this other things to you've kind of taken it and you've made a business out of it. And so
Yes.
tell me a little bit about this.
Well, in the first place, I wasn't a businesswoman. Artists are terrible business people, and
Yes.
I've become one.
Well,
But
not to interrupt, but I remember Bruce once talking about Music Cares. And,
oh yeah,
they were giving him
oh
an
yeah.
award, and
Mhm.
he says, "And we are bad with our money."
Yes. Oh, are we not? Oh yeah.
Yes, yes,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
But it's doesn't mean we have to be. It's just this kind of like we didn't think we needed to be. But
right,
anyway, yes, I've been on many rabbit trails and hit many brick walls, and I've learned to trust that the brick walls are just turning points.
yes, okay,
So I went from I never was a production assistant. I was always a producer from
okay,
from the times I was doing my demos
got it,
for my different publishing companies.
okay,
And but started it, I was doing background vocals one day for Ed Bruce, and Tommy West, who produced Jim Croce and other people, was producing because Jim had died in that plane crash. So we started talking songwriting at the session, and I played him a couple of songs. Long story short, maybe a year later, he formed MTM Records with Alan Bernard from California and Howard Stark from New York, and I was their first artist signed. And it was a whirlwind thing, and um, I won the ACM New Female Vocalist of the Year a couple of years later. I had a #1 record across the board, Billboard and everywhere else, beat out Randy Travis, and had some other top 10s as we rolled along. But then the record label folded because BMG bought MTM Enterprises and didn't want a record label. I was in my 30s by then, so it was people like Faith Hill were coming along really young, and so my era of being an artist, there was a roadblock in because of my age. So I went into songwriting, and then I had a #1 record on, Until I Met You. No, Until I Met You was my #1, sorry. One Way Ticket, Because I Can, which was cut by LeAnn Rimes. And, I was on, it was in several, I have catalogs in several publishing companies, but that ended, people stopped cutting what I was, for whatever reasons, that I was writing at the time. And so that dead end happened. And so I really pressed into vocal training when a friend of mine named Carol Chase was on, I had done a lot of session work with her, and I had written with her at Warner Chapel, and she knew what I could do more than I did. So she got a gig on the road touring with Leonard Skinner, and she was having trouble with one note. So she asked me how to do it. She asked me to help her figure out how to hit that confidently every night. And I didn't know I knew, but I did. And so that started me on well, I know enough, I've been doing this a lot. Maybe I can do a little vocal coaching. And I, kind of hung my sign out there, and lo and behold, there were a lot of people that wanted to take from me, and I was really good at doing it. So
Hmm.
I grew from there. And then everything kind of cycled back. Am and always will be a vocal coach and mentor of other artists now.
Okay.
But in doing that, a lot of them need production, a lot of them need co-writing, and I performed with some of them. I used to do these virtual rounds called cloud rounds. So everything I've ever done, I'm still doing.
Yeah. But it's expanded. You're
Yes,
doing it more
it
and
it
different in
helps.
different ways. Yeah.
Right, right. And multiple, first of all, in a business sense, it's multiple streams of income. But in a
Yeah.
personal sense, I don't get bored.
Yeah. That's is good to know. Yes, I get that. So I'm fascinated by all of this, but you you work with people who aren't just quote unquote musicians or singers. If I'm reading this correctly, right, you help people find their voice.
Right.
Tell me a
Speaking
little
as
bit
well.
about that. Yeah, tell me about that.
Well, my method is kind of unique. It doesn't mean I'm the only one that can help you, but it sure works. It's a three-stranded cord that deals with breath and keeping your throat open, and performance, which means communication skills. And you've got to have all three, and they affect each other. So when, and I gradually sort of developed this three-stranded idea, and I trademarked it, actually, called Power Path and Performance. And now I've got several courses on it, and I teach speakers with it as well. And it teaches you to power your voice from the pelvic floor instead of your diaphragm, because then you have control, you have support, but you also have wide ribs. And that's for speakers and singers. Like, speakers should walk knees first rather than nose first, and podcasters should have the mic closer to them like I do, not way in front where you have to lean over and tighten your rib cage up. If you're sitting or standing, you should be powering from the pelvic floor. Then you power it through an open instead of tight throat, which opens up, down, and back. And it has a lot to do with what your face does and where your posture is. So it's like you're pulling words instead of pushing words.
Hmm.
And then performance is getting back to why we have this. You know, why do we have a voice? And it's to deliver messages. But then you got to be clear. Well, if I'm delivering messages, who am I talking to? And right now I'm looking at the webcam, but I'm certainly not talking to it. I'm talking to you. If you're in front of an audience, you need to be talking to the one heart of the venue. I'll tell you who does that really well. Bruce Springsteen and Bono, okay? And
Talk to
Garth.
me a little about that.
Mhm. Okay. When they are in concert, when they are doing their thing, they're so focused on communicating like a laser beam that everybody gets the feeling that they're only there for them and they're talking right to them if they're facing in their direction. It looks like, even with the spotlight in your eyes, if in your mind you're focusing on that one heart, and here's the secret to doing that, okay? For all you singers and speakers out there that are listening to this, it's knowing what you want. You actually want to get a reaction. Otherwise, why are you making a sound? It's not just a narcissistic spilling of the beans here. That's useless unless you get somebody to respond. Well, what does that mean? It doesn't necessarily mean applause. It can mean freezing in their seats because you can't move, they feel too much. Or if you're using, if you got to use your imagination, if you're not able to see them clearly, you use your imagination, and in your imagination, you get them to move their eyes a certain way, or you get them to cock their heads or stop reading their cell phone. Something that means, I heard you.
Mm-hmm.
That's the secret. You know what? That is stage presence. And that's what Bruce Springsteen does.
Yeah. I mean, one of the common things I hear on this show are people when they're talking about whether it's Bruce or another musician, I felt like they were speaking to me.
Yeah.
And that connection is, I think,
Yes.
what we want. And I do think that during the pandemic and during that time, we were all thirsty for that because we couldn't connect.
Yes.
No matter how much through Zoom or other things, we miss that connection.
Mm-hmm. You know what? People want to be heard.
Yes.
And even if they're only talking non-verbally, they want to be acknowledged because it makes them feel valid, and they are valid.
Yeah.
And it's such a, an impersonal world. Now, you might even know a million people, but you don't, who do you really connect with? So when you give someone that gift of being seen, and oh my gosh, does he do that? Yeah.
Yeah. To move it over to podcasting just for a minute, I
Mhm.
get every once in a while, I will get people talking to me about, I've thought about doing a podcast, and I always tell them, that's great. They're more the merrier, but what are you wanting to do?
Right.
What are you wanting to
Right.
say? And who are you wanting to talk to?
Mhm.
And if you're wanting to do this to make bundles of money, that's probably not the right, this is not, there are very few people making buku monies on podcasting. But if your goal, like myself, is to find interesting people,
Mhm.
to talk to them and help them share their story.
Right.
And majority of my guests are people who've never been on a podcast. I have to convince them. They go, no one will care about my story, Jesse. And I go, everyone has a story.
Yeah.
Every Springsteen fan, you bring a unique perspective,
Yeah.
and people want to hear that other perspective. So,
Right.
yeah.
As a podcaster myself, I totally confirm that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Talk about your podcast.
It's called All Things Vocal, and that pretty much explains it. It's for singers and speakers, and really more career-oriented singing and speaking, because it gives career advice. I have a sort of a split of content. One is interviews, and I just interviewed Matt Carney, who is a pop artist and a student of mine, and two, vocal lessons. So people that really can't afford me as a vocal coach, or can't afford one of my courses even, they can get it for free, or they can learn that they can trust me by, getting my vocal lessons through my podcast.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love it. And, it's like, you're so right. It is a long tail for me. It does bring in clients because they learn that I know what I'm talking about.
Correct.
and that they can trust me. So I've gotten production clients and vocal clients from the blog and podcast. The blog's got over 2 million views, I think. The podcast is growing, but that's not why I do it. You're so right. It wouldn't be worth it. I love it. I
Right.
actually love it. So, I mean,
Yeah,
and I'm real busy. I don't, it would be crazy. I wouldn't do it if I didn't love it.
absolutely. It is. I'm looking forward to listening to it. I have not checked it out
Yay,
yet. I
yeah,
will. That
it's
that sounds really
everywhere.
good. Yes, yeah, like everything else.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Um, so with all your long musical career and sh you listeners, she has a pretty now who we know, of course, Wikipedia is never wrong, but you have a pretty impressive Wikipedia page
Thank
that shares a lot of great things about it. Are Who are the artists that you admire, that you go to listen to for entertainment, that you're a fan of?
Well, this will shock you, but my husband and I just bought tickets for Andre Bocelli in February.
Okay, I can see that. That sounds good.
Yeah, I love everything. Whether it's rap that's got really good messages, whether it's classical, or I love James Taylor. We've definitely been to see him several times, and Vince Gill and Bonnie Raitt. Uh, you know, uh, I just have a lot of. I love great music and great songs in every genre.
So I just had a writer on the
Uh-huh.
podcast. I haven't released the episode yet. It's in the bank, but a guy named David Leaf, who has written, he's updated his book on Brian Wilson. He was involved with Beautiful Dreamer, the documentary on
Wow.
Brian Wilson finishing Smile, but he was also involved with TNT, did a tribute to Brian Wilson. And, they had this huge arrangement, wide variety of artists. And he was sharing that Vince Gill
Mhm.
doing Smile and sing Surfs Up, that's it, Surfs Up,
Yeah.
blew him away. And I agree. Vince, the first show we saw, the big show we saw after the pandemic, was we had bought tickets to see the Eagles Hotel California tour.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
like 2.5 years after we bought him, we finally saw, and Vince was performing with him. And it's
Mhm.
just, his voice is beautiful.
Oh, it is. It truly is. I've done backgrounds with him, and here and there in
Yeah.
Nashville, and yeah. And
Hmm.
he loves music. I mean, he's part of this Western swing group that
Yeah.
performs in Nashville, and he'll just be on stage. I mean, he's the stadium guy who's just in a club called Third and Lindsley, with
Hmm.
some other incredible players, and
Yeah.
he loves it for what it is.
Yeah.
For just doing the music. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's next for you?
Well, I do have a new album. That's not a new album. It's old now, but it's my most recent one that I've still got out there, that I've had some luck with. The first single on it got placed in the Canadian sci-fi series The Expanse, of all things. I was, quote unquote, an ancient country voice. And that's and that of all things, my husband was a percussionist in the Memphis Symphony, along with being a session drummer. So he's like, ancient country, great. But anyway, uh, that was fun. It was so much fun to put that off our bucket list. We got to write what we wanted to, and
Mhm.
it's, John and Judy Rodman album. But what's next for me? I just released on my website a course that I've been building this year, called Speaking Voice Technique for Speakers Only.
Okay.
And the rest of it is, I will gradually migrate the rest of my courses over there as well. On long story short, what I'm doing is continuing to produce people. I love being in the studio. The studio is part of my DNA as well. And I love teaching and mentoring and helping other people find their voices and what their voices are supposed to be doing and protecting their voices. I tell you what, it's a cottage industry for a vocal coach to be working with people past COVID.
I
Because
bet.
yeah, and so I've helped one of the people I helped was sang background for Dolly, and she had COVID, and Ray Stevens, and she had COVID and lost her voice. And after she got well, we worked for a week or two, and she was back on. She went on the road back to LA with Dolly, and back on in the thing with Ray. So it can be done. And if anybody's out there with vocal trouble, don't be hopeless, because let it rest, and then it's amazing how much you can recover.
So if someone asks me what my mission statement is I say, I believe every music fan has a story, and it's my job to capture them and
Right.
share them with other people. So do you have a mission statement?
Mhm. Yes, to work with voices whose messages matter and make sure that they are safe and maximized. Because I don't want to work with voices who spread the wrong messages in the world. And this really kind of gets me back to your show here about Springsteen, because I think he's definitely one of the voices that matter in the world.
Yeah. And I love that message, by the way. And I do think that um, in today's environment, there is a lot of noise,
Oh
and
gosh.
there is a lot of people who are unkind and
Mhm.
spread messages that are counterproductive to helping each other.
Right.
And so I think that is that's a beautiful mission statement, and it's a beautiful mission. I think
Thank
that is
you.
a great idea.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just focused in on that. I've been doing that for years, but I really focused in on it
Hmm.
this year, and a lot of it due to, like you're talking about, art needs to move life towards the light, towards
Yes.
something good, something better. And I've known about Springsteen for ever, and I've appreciated some of his music. I was more of a Rolling Stones person,
Right.
than anything. But when I saw, for some reason, I just didn't get connected with Bruce Springsteen as much as I did some of the other things, the other artists of the time. But when I saw him after 9/11 do My City of Ruins on that TV benefit,
Yes.
he is now one of my all-time favorite artists ever, because I think he is a healer and a uniter, and he's for the common man. And besides that, I love his energy,
Yes.
because it's a bit of a trick, I believe.
Yeah.
It's what I teach, which is make it look like and seem like you would do you would do handstands on the stage if your fans wanted you to. You would jump up on the lights and jump off into them and do anything it would take to get there. And all that. But you actually aren't. I think he's as controlled. I think he's uber controlled. That's why he's still got a voice. And that's why his voice is so big. So, yeah, he's a great artist. He really is. And he does the magic trick of using his voice, using his resonance and his energy to connect and project all that strength and power. And that's the magic.
He was on Howard Stern
I saw
yesterday.
yesterday. I
Yes, it
saw him
was.
earlier.
And
Mhm.
he talked about that one of the tricks he does with his voice, and he showed it. He said, I can kind of be quiet and whisper, and
Mhm.
then I can be really strong, and it sounds like I'm shouting, but it's just me using my voice. And so you're very correct.
Oh, that's funny. And
Yes.
actually totally it. Yep.
Yeah. I By the way, that moment was after 9/11. I was a casual fan, and I've told this story multiple times. So listeners, skip ahead for a few minutes, but Judy hasn't heard it. And um, And then after 9/11,
Yeah.
they do that City of Ruins, and I
You
was like,
saw
oh
him
my
live.
goodness. Yes. And then in 2002, just a few months later, he was touring and I saw him live for the first time. And then that was it. I was sold, right?
Yeah.
It just,
Yeah.
move over. I now have a new passion slash obsession,
Oh, yeah.
depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah.
That is beautiful. Have you got to
And
see
then he
Bruce
did
Springsteen?
Rise, and then he did, Rise. What's
Yeah,
it? Rise Up.
yeah, The Rising. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, The Rising. The Rising.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's like the sequel to the
Yes.
City of Ruins. Yeah.
Have you got to see him perform live yet?
No, I haven't. This is going to be sound kind of weird, but I haven't seen very many shows live because I'm
Okay.
doing my own, and
Yeah,
I'm
because you're
also
busy doing
it's
another
a
thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, I know
But
one
my
of the
husband and I don't dance very much together because we're always the band.
yes. Uh there is a local talk show host that does sports talk, but growing up in Dallas, he was always in bands, right?
Yeah,
And so like there is huge holes in his pop culture. Like, how could you not do this? Like, I was in bands and stuff. I wasn't home watching TV. I was out playing bands,
yeah,
and doing shows.
yeah.
So absolutely. That is great. Any final thoughts before we get to the Mary question?
No, I just so appreciate your show. I think it's so cool to magnify his voice.
Yes,
It's worth it, and it's interesting too. I can well imagine the stories. Of course, I've listened to some of the episodes, and
that's very
the
sweet of you.
stories of people interacting with his music and or his shows or whatever. He's the kind of artist that you remember your life by. So,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
rock, rock.
Yeah,
It's
he
really rock
says,
what he did.
as he says, I've been having a conversation with my audience for this year, and more than one person that says he's, the soundtrack of our lives.
Mhm.
And I do love that. Though he told in his autobiography, there was a time several years ago that Mick and Keith were
Uh-huh,
going to perform in Jersey or New
uh-huh,
York somewhere, and they said, "Hey, would you want to come on stage and perform with us?" And he goes, "Of course."
uh-huh.
And he said there was this little crowdy garage, small little studio, and they were cramped in there, and they played a couple hours, or just rehearsing. And he said that was the thrill. The next day in Madison Square Garden in front of everyone, that didn't matter.
So
That
what
was no, just the idea. He said, because when I was a youngster, I'd listen to those records, I'd watch them on TV, and I would try to duplicate that.
I would so go to that show, okay?
Right. And so to have him, he said that was just the ultimate to him. It was nice. He said it was nice being on stage and playing, but the idea was being in that room,
Mm,
just jamming and trying to
yeah,
work it out made him happy.
yeah.
So yeah, that is great. That is wonderful. All right. I'm going to give you a minute to, after after you answer, I'm going to let you promote and how to reach you. But in case you are a fan of Judy's and you're listening to this, thank you. I end every podcast with the Mary question. So Jay Armstrong, who is an honors English teacher, he just recently retired in the Philadelphia area, would teach his audience. He would take his students and they would break apart Thunder Road, look at all the lyrics of the song, talk about the imagery, and then compare it to Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken. And at the end of the 2 days, he would ask his students, does Mary get in the car?
I love it.
Judy, that is your homework. Does Mary get in
Uh-huh.
the car at the end of Thunder Road?
And my answer is, of course she does. Are you kidding? Who wouldn't get in a car with him?
I love it. That's great. Good deal. All right. If someone wants to learn more about your wonderful music and your podcast, what's the best way?
Well, the hub is judyrodman.com, and they can find everything there, unless they
Okay.
want to go on a podcast app and look for All Things Vocal.
Okay, good. Wonderful. I appreciate this. This was a blast. Thank
Thank you.
you. You were a wonderful guest, and I have been trying not to be self-conscious that, man, I'm doing this wrong. I just know 'cause she's sitting there as our vocal coach going,
What's
Jesse,
funny is
Jesse,
everybody
Jesse.
every host that I guest for does that.
Right.
It's
It's like,
hilarious.
yes. It is just so
Oh,
fun. You were a joy. Thank you so much. And I can't wait to check out some of your music and check out the podcast. And
great.
I wish you continued success. And if you get a chance, he's touring in 2023 and he has a new album out November 11th that is all soul covers.
Oh, you're kidding. Wow.
No,
Oh my gosh, that's right down my alley.
I know he was for the longest time he tells the story that he didn't think he had a very good voice. Like my talent is my songwriting, my talent is my performing, not my voice. And at 72 or 73 he's like, no, I got a pretty decent voice. So he has an album of all soul covers.
Wow.
It's coming out November 11th. You can go to YouTube and look at a couple. It's pretty fun.
Oh,
It's
I
a
will.
really
I
the
will
three I've
definitely.
heard are really good.
Great.
So, all right, Judy, take care. Be safe. Listeners, go get vaccinated. Go get
Yes.
boosted, and let's be kind to each other because that's how we're going to get through this. Thank you,
Amen to
Judy.
that.
Thank you, listeners. We'll talk to you soon.
And
Goodbye.
I'll be with you. Bye.
Doing a podcast at times can be a one-way conversation, and I hate that. So please let me know what you like and don't like about the work I'm doing. You can reach the podcast via email at setlistingbruce@gmail.com. The show is on Twitter at setlistingbruce, and my personal Twitter is at jessejacksondfw. You can support the podcast by subscribing via your favorite podcast player and leaving us a review. The more reviews we have, the easier it is for people to find us. And please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they love Bruce or music, because it will make a difference. You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.